Hello and welcome. My name is Chris from ChristopherHall.com. Welcome to this whiteboard presentation where we're going to be talking about the core muscles or core training, but we're going to be talking more about the rectus abdominals, or the rectus abdominis. And what we are going to be talking about is essentially three different slides covering three different sections. We're going to talk about the abdominal fascia, we're going to talk about the rectus abdominis itself, and then we're going to sort of start to open up into core exercises. So we're going to start to have an understanding of the different core exercises and how some work and some maybe don't work. So if we click onto the first slide, in fact, before we do that, we are going to talk about my social platforms. So it's going to be, first of all, it's Twitter, then Facebook, and then Instagram, where we have on Twitter it's Christopher Hall, at Christopher Hall. On Facebook it's Christopher Hall Training, and Instagram is Christopher Hall. So please do come along to those, like and follow, or you can come to the website, which is ChristopherHall.com/join. You can join the monthly newsletter, which is all video content. We try to cover as much as we can with regards to health and fitness, anything under the umbrella of exercise, diet, behavior, habits, building habits, breaking habits, different types of diets. We talk about movement, fitness, performance, and everything that sort of comes under that. So as we come back to this whiteboard presentation, again, we are talking about the abdominals. Now, coming on to slide 1, we are talking about the abdominal fascia. Now, the abdominal fascia contains the abdominal muscles. Now, there are a lot of different muscles, and as you can see on this diagram over to the right hand side, you've got all the different muscles. So you've got the external obliques, internal obliques, transverse abdominis, and then you've got the transversalis fascia as well underneath. Plus you've got various other, you've got the rectus abdominals here, and you've got the linea alba going up through the middle. Plus you've got various other bits and pieces as well. So that just gives you a quick overview of what's there, but what it does is it connects to the aponeurosis of the three layers of the abdominal muscles. So all of those muscles join into what is essentially a fascia, and what it does at the top is it connects the pectoralis muscles. So if you go from the bottom, it goes right from the pelvis, it goes right up through the abdominal wall where all the rectus abdominis, the internal and external obliques, and the transverse abdominis all attach. It goes all the way up, and then the pectoral muscles attach into the top of it. And it also connects other fascial elements that cross the midline. So it's not only a straight up and down system, it's a diagonally across system, and it's a sort of sideways across system as well. So it's not just, certainly when it comes to exercise like we're going to talk about, it's not just all about doing sit-ups and crunches. And if again you ask me, I would say remove that exercise from your training program, because there are a lot more effective exercises, and we'll go some way to explaining what all that means in a second. So if we then go on to slide 2, so far we've just looked at the architecture of the fascia and the different muscles that join in. What we're now going to do is we'll talk about the rectus abdominis a little bit more, and some of its sort of, I guess you could say, functional anatomy, if you will. So when we come onto the rectus abdominis, you can see from the picture here on the right hand side that essentially it's broken into two sections with tendons and fascia. So you've got one section, you've got two sections, then you've got it subdivided again across, and I'll explain that in a second. But all of these sort of tendons and fascias, they're in place to prevent the rectus abdominis being ripped apart from hoop stresses. Now, hoop stresses, you may have heard of intra-abdominal pressure before, and intra-abdominal pressure is where we're contracting our abdominals, but you've got the pressure from within pushing out. So you can see on this diagram at the bottom here, you've got all the pressure being pushed out. That creates the hoop stresses, and what the fascia and the rectus abdominis and the obliques are doing is they are being held together by the fascia, by the tendons, so they don't get ripped apart. If they were one unit, they would be a lot weaker, but now they are sort of broken into many different units. They create I guess what you could describe it as, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, if you will. So what we have to understand with hoop stresses, it's the force exerted on the wall of a cylinder. So that's in a short way of what I've just explained. So you've got the intra-abdominal pressure being pushed out, and that's the force being exerted on the cylinder, which is the abdominal cavity, if you will, which contains the abdominal wall, the muscles of the spine as well, so on and so forth. But all sections are activated together, and it's not an upper or lower. So that's I guess the final bit of the abdominals to understand, is the fact that the upper and the lower parts, they're all activated by the same nerve supply. So you get a lot of people talking about, I need to do exercises for my lower abs and my upper abs. If you look at it from an anatomy perspective, then you'll find out that it's just the same nerve supply activating all the way through the muscles. So there are, in some ways, from the body's perspective, there are no such thing as upper and lower abs. It's just one thing. Yes, they are broken up into sections, but how they're activated is through the same nerve supply, if you will. So what we've got so far is we understand the fascia, and we understand all the different muscles that is sort of contained within that fascia. We understand a little bit more about the rectus abdominis as a muscle itself, and how it's organised and how it's structured, and why it's broken up into give it that sort of six-pack effect. It's not necessarily there for aesthetics. It's there more for a performance and function outcome, if you will, because it doesn't want to get ripped apart under, let's just say, heavy load. So on the final slide, we're just going to talk quickly about some exercises that we're talking about. So now, obviously, there is a greater library of exercises that we would talk about here, and the first one is the side plank, because it activates the QL, which is another muscle of the core that gets ignored. The transverse abdominis, the obliques, and the rectus abdominis. So what we're talking about is all those muscles that I talked about to start with, plus the QL, all getting activated within one muscle. So what we're starting to do is we're starting to integrate muscles into one system, into one unit. And what that does, that integrates movement and challenges the abdominals. So if you look at the picture at the top, you've got me there doing what is essentially a reverse chop. So I'm integrating movement of the hips, and I'm integrating movement of the shoulders. Now what that's doing, that's challenging the abdominals and the abdominal wall with the obliques, the QL, as well, to work as one unit. And I'm not just focusing on the six-pack abdominals. That's never really been my focus of my training. It's more about function and how I perform in the sport that I do, being cycling, or just in everyday life, having to lift things around. Obviously, I work in a gym, I'm lifting heavy things around all the time, so I need my body to be functioning at its optimum, if you will, as much as possible. And the final thing on those types of core exercises is it transmits lateral forces across the abdominal wall. So again, when I talked about the fascia to start with, it's just not an up and down system. It's not just a flexion system. There are diagonal stresses that need to be in place. There are lateral stresses that go from side to side that need to be taken care of. So if you look at the side plank, that's more of a sideways stress, if that's the way I can describe it. Normally you would call it lateral, but if you aren't up with the terminology, then again it's sort of across the abdominals from side to side. But also you've got the diagonal effect, which is where the chopping type movements, and that can be a normal wood chop, or it could be the reverse wood chop that you've got on the screen there. And finally, if we're talking more about low back pain clients or people with weak and unstable cores, we would focus more on isometric holding exercises like planks and side planks, but we would do them in short intervals. And what that's there to do is that's there to build endurance within the core, because what it's allowing to do, it's allowing a contraction which is making and challenging the muscles and making them work. Then it's relaxing them, allowing oxygen to get into the system to, in a sense, give it a period of recovery so it can go again. So what we're training our abdominals to do is co-contract together, remain rigid and remain stiff and keep the spine stable, then release, go back into that in a repetition form. So we're not repeating it like a sit-up, which is flexion extension. We're maintaining a position of the spine, which is what we would do when we lift something heavy anyway, and then release that and then co-contract again. Release, co-contract, release, co-contract. So that's certainly with low back pain clients, and in certain aspects of certainly exercise and fitness. If we're talking about movement, which is just moving around in everyday life, getting up out of a seat, getting down into a seat, if you have a healthy spine and if you have a healthy, strong core, then yes, you could go into flexion, extension, rotation, and things like that. But when we're challenging it with weight and resistance, it's a lot more effective to have a foundation of isometric strength, and then you build the movement on top of it. So what I'm not trying to do is negate sort of movement exercises, going into full squats and things like that. I'm not there to negate that. I'm just there to put it into a context and a potential perspective to be able to structure a training program to make a core and to make a torso work more effectively. Because when we do come into movement and start introducing lifting, pushing, pulling, what we want the torso to do is to remain rigid. And what we then want to do is the limbs to do the movement. So it's the limbs that create the movement. We know that from the type of joints that are there. They're ball and socket joints, 2 at the hip and 2 at the shoulder. They are designed for movement. The spine is known as a slightly movable joint. So certainly when it's under stress, then it needs to be held in a stiff and a rigid way. When we aren't lifting heavy weights, then yes, we can move it because the stress and the pressure on the discs and the vertebrae isn't as strong. So hopefully that's brought a little bit more perspective to how the torso and how the abdominals are working. That's kind of the way I like to think about my core training, not only for myself but with the people that I train on a daily basis and on a regular basis. It's all about focusing on making those core muscles, as we talked about at the start, work as one unit, work as one system, and then we can start building the isolate. Not that I would ever really talk about and practice isolation exercises, but if you were to do it, that would be the order to do it in. Isometric holding, strong, stiff, stable core, and then move into the more movement-based type exercises. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from ChristopherHole.com. Please do come along to Twitter at Christopher Hole, Facebook Christopher Hole Training, and Instagram Christopher Hole, or alternatively come to the website, sign up to the newsletter at ChristopherHole.com/join. It'd be great to see you there. Answer any questions that you may have. If you're watching this video, please like, share, comment. It'd be great to hear your feedback and to answer any questions that you may have. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from Christopher Hole Training. I'll speak to you in the next whiteboard presentation.